Well, welcome to the 700 Club. $600,000 in debt. What's that? That's what a child born today will pay over his or her lifetime on account of the president's outrageous $5 trillion budget. Moderate Democrats don't like the high price tag, but Chuck Schumer is behind every part of what he calls the big, bold, robust way. Not one Republican supports it. So what happens next? Here's Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson.
Moderate Senate Democrats hope to convince their colleagues to cut the multi-trillion-dollar budget bill before they commit their support, while Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer vows to keep all of President Biden's agenda in the final product.
It will have every part of the Biden plan in a big, bold, robust way.
Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders, Senate Budget Chairman, exerted major influence on the bill.
It really is the most progressive priorities we've seen out of the Democratic Party put into one proposal.
Connor Semmelsberger from the Family Research Council says this bill is not what families want.
It really is this liberal wish list that is couched in this language for being about families, when in actuality, it's really what liberal elites, many of which don't have children themselves, are dictating for the rest of the country.
Semmelsberger says Senator Joe Manchin helped Republicans take an important step in preventing taxpayer funds from paying for abortions.
Senator Langford worked with his colleagues across the aisle and actually got an amendment added to this budget resolution, which reaffirmed the Hyde Amendment and then the Weldon Amendment, which protects the consciences of healthcare professionals to not perform abortions.
Economist Stephen Moore told CBN News' Faith Nation he's aghast at how much money the U.S. government plans to borrow.
This is a gigantic amount of money. Each child born today, if this passes, will pay $600,000 in debt over their lifetime. I have nothing good to say about this. We should be saving money right now, not spending it.
And fears if this becomes law, it will cause a financial crisis.
I am very worried about inflation, especially if they pass. Look, if you pass another $4.5 trillion of debt borrowing, that's going to be financed by printing more money. And when you print more money, that means more inflation.
As House Democrats prepare to take up the budget reconciliation bill, there's a chance the price tag could go even higher, and they may remove Senator Langford's pro-life protections too. Pat?
Well, Abby, give us a sense of the timeline. What happens next, and what else do they have to do before that bill becomes final?
Well, it's important to know that what the Senate passed this week is really just the first step in the budget reconciliation process and is just a framework. So this is now moving on to the House that's going to reconvene August 23rd. And when they come back, they're going to fill in the details of some of the things that Senate Democrats want to see in the bill, the White House wants to see in the bill, and they're going to merge that with some of the budget plans that House Democrats have. And as this process plays out, we can expect to see probably some pretty public battles between moderate House Democrats and progressive House Democrats, who both know in a very slim Democratic majority in the House that their votes are incredibly important, that their votes matter. And moderate Democrats want to bring the price tag down, while the progressive Democrats want a little more spending for some more programs. So it's going to be very interesting to see how House Speaker Nancy Pelosi goes about handling this to get everyone in line, because they can just lose a few votes in order to get this passed. But I think we'll see the final product sometime in the early fall.
Well, Manchin and Sinema going to be for it or against it in the Senate, do you know?
This is the big question. Both of those senators are in their home districts right now. They're going to hear a lot from their constituents about how they feel. And both of them have very publicly, since taking that vote earlier this week, come out and said that they are incredibly uncomfortable with the $3.5 trillion price tag. And they're going to use negotiating power to try and get their colleagues to make cuts. But as I said, when this bill hits the House, the price tag could go even higher. But they are crucial votes. And as you said, every senator needs to be in line. Every Democratic senator needs to be in line in supporting this bill in order for it to hit President Biden's desk. And at the end of the day, they'll have negotiating power, but I think it's very unlikely that either of them vote against it because it really is the heart of President Biden's agenda.
Well, as I understand it, I don't want to belabor the point, but this is $3.5 trillion, but they're going to add another $3 trillion. It's going to go $5, $6, $7 trillion before they're finished. Am I right on that?
Well, so some of the estimates are saying that but right now it looks like $3.5 trillion, but over time it actually could be closer to the numbers you're mentioning, $5 trillion, because once these programs are put in place, Republicans and Democrats know that they are almost impossible to scale back. So these are programs that once the bill puts them in, we will likely have them for the rest of our government. And they could get very expensive over time, and the price tag could get much higher than what's being predicted right now.
Abigail, thanks for your report. Now, CBN News financial editor Drew Parkhill is here to talk about the economic impact of this proposed government spending. How would this big budget spending affect an average American, Drew?
Okay, this is very important, Pat, because this plays right off of what Abigail was just saying, that this spending, it becomes institutionalized. The Democrats realize that they have a moment, quote unquote, where they have all three branches, which doesn't always happen all that often. So even though they have basically no real majorities, it's basically 50-50 across the board, they're just going to go for it, because even if they lose next year in the House, hey, their programs are there and they're there forever. So here's what's not being talked about, Pat, about this budget blueprint. They're projecting good growth this year after the lockdowns lift, because the growth, Biden talks about the Biden recovery, it started last year. Okay, that's a statistical fact. So we're going to have good growth this year, pretty good growth next year. But then they're only talking about 1.8% growth. What does that mean for the next couple of years? It means businesses grow more slowly. Income grows more slowly. So people are going to have less money coming in, but prices are going up. And by the way, this is very important, Pat, even as prices are going up now, income is going up now, but prices are going up a little more. So people are starting to fall behind, and that's a big concern. Now, let me step back and look at the bigger picture. The president's talking about, well, we're going to be paying for this. No, their own budgets are projecting massive deficits. Right now, as this graphic shows, we are at $28 trillion in our national debt. They're looking at $42 trillion in about 10 years. Now, what do average people think about that? They believe 61%, according to a Rasmussen poll, believe the Biden administration will raise taxes on the middle class. Even though they say, oh, that won't happen, 27% say they don't think it's likely, and 12% say, well, they're not sure. But still, Pat, a clear majority expect higher taxes on the way.
This is true. This whole thing is going to kill the economy. If they raise all these taxes, if they take away the capital gains tax, if they begin to raise the ceiling on inheritance, I mean, the stuff they're talking about will destroy this economy.
Absolutely. It would absolutely slow down economic growth big time. I mean, there's no question about that. You can't have all this government and these higher taxes, because there's research that indicates once you get a certain level, above a certain level in taxation, the economy simply slows down. And by the way, that will mean slower stock market prices will still go up, but at a slower rate. So, yeah, there's no question. And that means lower income while prices are going up at the same time. So your standard of living goes down over time.
Thanks, Drew. Our CBN News financial editor, Drew Parkhill. Well, in other news, it's called energy terrorism. That's what experts are calling suspicious activity in the Straits of Hormuz, the main shipping route for oil from the Middle East. The big question, is Iran trying to shut it down? National security correspondent Caitlin Burke has that.
We've recently seen a deadly drone attack on a commercial ship attributed to Iran, an attempted hijacking that Iran is believed to be responsible for, and suspicious communications coming from several other ships in the same region.
It's a power play. They don't really fear retaliation from the United States. And what they're saying to us, quite bluntly, is that they are now very comfortable disrupting shipping through the strait.
The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. It's a crucial shipping lane for oil coming out of the Middle East, and Iran no longer needs it, recently launching their own oil export terminal at Jask port.
Jask is below the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian regime invested a huge amount of resources and money in that port so that they can export oil from outside of the strait, from the Gulf of Oman rather than the Persian Gulf. And so that gives them the flexibility to threaten the strait.
Victoria Coates, a deputy national security advisor under the Trump administration, says it's also important to factor in the hardline new government that's now in power in Tehran.
They are showing everyone in the region there's a new sheriff in town. They want to try to make clear to the world that they are unbowed by the U.S. sanctions.
Continued attacks on ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz could result in global oil shortages and higher prices. But the U.S. is in a unique position.
The Iranians don't need the strait, and the reality is that we don't either. Thanks to the American energy renaissance that we've seen over really the last decade, but particularly over the last 5 years, the United States is now one of the big three energy producers in the world, along with Saudi Arabia and Russia.
There is concern, however, that the Biden administration's energy policies are curbing domestic energy production.
On the one hand, they're going to cancel the Keystone pipeline. On the other hand, they're going to greenlight the Nord Stream 2 pipeline into Germany. So they're constricting flows of energy through the United States by canceling Keystone, but allowing the flow of fossil fuels into Europe.
While launching provocation after provocation, Iran continues to delay negotiations about re-entering a nuclear deal. Experts warning that now is the time for a strong response from the Biden administration. Pat?
Caitlin, what kind of response would bring Iran back in line, do you think?
Well, back in 1988, Iran took similar action, disabling a U.S. ship off of Qatar. Then President Ronald Reagan responded by launching Operation Praying Mantis, which either destroyed or disabled half of the Iranian Navy. As you may remember, that really slowed them down. So experts are saying we need a strong approach like that to the provocations that we're seeing now.
Why is now the ideal time for that kind of strong response?
Well, during my conversation with Victoria Coates, she pointed out that much of the strength and control Iran is trying to project to the U.S. right now is a show. In reality, they're dealing with U.S. sanctions, but also a lot of domestic unrest. People are angry about the way that the pandemic was handled, about work conditions, about a severe water shortage, about a government that doesn't have their best interests in mind. So now is the best time for Biden to take a page from Reagan's playbook, anticipating that Tehran really is struggling to juggle it all.
Caitlin, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say, America, when you look at the Permian, when you look at the fracking of all the energy opportunities, when you think of what we have in Alaska, we are swimming in oil. But what's happened, Biden is trying to curtail American energy production under the chimera of the Green New Deal. It's nonsense. And he was acting illegally when he shut down the Keystone pipeline, but the people who were behind it have stopped permanently. He didn't have the authority to do that, but he did it anyhow. He's acting as a dictator, a terrorist without any regard to the Constitution. We have plenty of oil here, especially when you look up in Alaska and the Permian Basin and other places. But what is happening? Biden is trying to curtail American energy while they're actually calling on OPEC to increase production. The whole thing is insanity. It's as if they hate America and they're trying to destroy us.